The moment Park Ranger David Mitchell saw the edge of that backpack sticking out from beneath the rocks, he knew he'd found them. 10 years of searching, 10 years of wondering, and there it was. The distinctive red fabric belonged to Michael Chen, the father who'd vanished with his teenage son Alex on Mount Whitney back in September 2014. What David would discover over the next 3 hours would finally answer the question that had haunted search teams, investigators, and the Chen family for a decade. Michael Chen was 42 years old and worked as an engineer in Sacramento. His son Alex had just turned 15 that summer, starting his sophomore year of high school. They'd planned this trip for months, a father-son adventure before Alex got too busy with school and sports. Mount Whitney stood as the highest peak in the continental United States, and Michael wanted to share that accomplishment with his boy. They'd trained together, running trails near their home, building up their endurance. Michael's wife Sarah had helped them pack their gear the night before they left, making sure they had everything on the checklist: extra water, energy bars, first aid supplies, emergency blankets, flashlights, and a GPS beacon that Michael wore clipped to his belt. The Chen family lived in a 2-story house in suburban Sacramento, where Michael had converted the garage into a home gym specifically for their Whitney training. Every evening after dinner, father and son would spend an hour on the treadmill, gradually increasing the incline to simulate mountain hiking. Alex had initially resisted the training schedule, preferring to play video games with his friends online. But as weeks passed, he began to embrace the challenge, even creating a countdown calendar on his bedroom wall marking days until their Whitney adventure. Sarah would often find them in the garage, Michael explaining navigation techniques while Alex practiced with their compass and topographic maps. Michael had attempted Mount Whitney once before, back in college, but had to turn around due to altitude sickness. This time he'd prepared differently, researching altitude acclimatization techniques and planning a slower ascent. He'd joined online hiking forums where experienced Whitney hikers shared advice about everything from what brand of energy bars worked best to which sections of trail were most challenging. He printed out pages of tips and kept them in a binder that he studied religiously. Alex would tease him about his over-preparation, but Michael believed that proper planning prevented poor performance, a motto he'd learned during his time in the Boy Scouts as a youth. They started their hike on September 12, 2014, signing in at the Whitney Portal trailhead at 5:30 in the morning. The ranger station recorded their permit information, their planned route, and their expected return time of 8 that evening. The permit process for Mount Whitney was notoriously competitive, with thousands of people entering a lottery for limited daily spots. Michael had applied 3 years in a row before finally securing permits for him and Alex. When the confirmation email arrived, he'd immediately called Sarah at her office, his excitement bubbling over like a child's on Christmas morning. Several other hikers remembered seeing them on the trail that morning. A couple from Germany took a photo with them at Outpost Camp, about 4 miles up the trail. Michael looked happy in that picture, his arm around Alex's shoulders, both of them smiling wide. The Germans, Hans and Greta Muller, would later provide this photo to investigators, the last known image of the father and son together. They remembered Michael helping them identify different peaks visible from Outpost Camp, pulling out his map to show them the surrounding geography. Alex had shared some of his trail mix with them, joking that his mom had packed enough food for a week-long expedition. The weather that day started perfect. Clear blue skies, temperatures in the low 60s, barely any wind. Perfect conditions for attempting the summit. Michael had checked the forecast repeatedly in the days before their hike. No storms predicted, no significant weather changes expected. He'd even called the ranger station the night before to double-check conditions on the mountain. Everything looked ideal for their ascent. The barometric pressure had been steady for days, usually a reliable indicator of stable weather. Michael had downloaded 3 different weather apps on his phone, cross-referencing their predictions to ensure accuracy. The trail from Whitney Portal begins in a forest of Jeffrey pines and white firs, following Lone Pine Creek through a series of cascading waterfalls. Michael and Alex stopped frequently in this lower section, not from fatigue, but from wonder. Alex used his phone to photograph unique rock formations and twisted trees shaped by centuries of wind and snow. Michael carried an old film camera, the same one his own father had used to document family trips decades earlier. He wanted some photos that couldn't be deleted with a finger swipe, permanent memories on paper that would yellow with age but never disappear into a broken hard drive. By noon, they'd reached trail camp at 12,000 feet. Another hiker, James Rodriguez, shared his lunch spot with them, He remembered Alex talking excitedly about making varsity soccer that year, and Michael proudly showing photos of Alex's games on his phone. They stayed there for about 30 minutes, eating sandwiches and refilling their water bottles from the stream. James watched them head up the famous 99 switchbacks toward Trail Crest, moving steadily but not rushing. He noted they seemed well prepared and in good spirits. James was an experienced mountaineer who'd climbed Whitney 17 times, and he remembered thinking that Michael had done everything right in preparing his son for the challenge ahead. Trail camp serves as the last major rest stop before the final push to the summit. Hikers often spend the night here, camping among the rocks to acclimatize before attempting the peak at dawn. Michael had considered this option, but decided against it, believing he and Alex were fit enough to complete the hike in a single day. The area around trail camp is austere, a moonscape of granite boulders and sparse vegetation. A small lake provides water, though it often freezes even in summer. Marmots, those plump mountain rodents, patrol the camp looking for dropped food, their sharp whistles alerting each other to approaching hikers. The 99 switchbacks represent one of the most challenging sections of the Mount Whitney Trail. The path zigzags up a steep granite face, gaining over 1,600 feet in less than 2 miles. At that altitude, every step becomes an effort. The air contains only 60% of the oxygen available at sea level. Most hikers need to stop frequently to catch their breath. Michael and Alex took their time, following the advice in their guidebook to maintain a slow, steady pace. They used the rest step technique Michael had read about, locking the back leg with each step to rest the muscles momentarily. Alex counted the switchbacks out loud, a game to maintain morale as they climbed higher into thinner air. The construction of these switchbacks was an engineering marvel completed in 1904. Crews used dynamite to blast a path through solid granite, creating a route that, while steep, allowed relatively safe passage for hikers and pack animals. Before the trail's construction, reaching Whitney's summit required technical climbing skills and equipment. Michael had shared this history with Alex during their training, showing him black and white photos of the trail builders suspended on ropes against the cliff face. Alex had gained a new appreciation for the trail, understanding that each step followed a path carved by workers over a century ago. They reached Trail Crest at 2 in the afternoon. A group of college students from UCLA saw them there, taking pictures at the junction where the trail meets the John Muir Trail. One of the students, Emma Watson, spoke with Michael briefly. He mentioned they were making good time and planned to reach the summit within the hour, then head back down. She noticed Alex seemed tired but excited, drinking water and eating an energy bar while his father checked their map. That was 2:30 in the afternoon, the last confirmed sighting of Michael and Alex Chen. Emma would later tell investigators that she remembered Michael's enthusiasm, how he'd pointed out various peaks to Alex, naming each one from memory. Trail Crest marks a psychological milestone for Whitney hikers. At 13,600 feet, it's where the trail crests the Sierra Nevada's main ridge, offering the first views west into Sequoia National Park. Many hikers experience a surge of emotion here, realizing the summit is finally within reach. The trail from this point follows a dramatic traverse across Whitney's western face, with dizzying drops on one side and towering cliffs on the other. Steel cables provide handholds in the most exposed sections, though many hikers find this part of the trail more intimidating than physically difficult. The summit of Mount Whitney sits at 14,505 feet. On clear days, you can see for miles in every direction. The Owens Valley spreads out to the east. The Sierra Nevada range extends endlessly to the west. Most hikers spend only 15 or 20 minutes at the top, taking photos and signing the summit register before beginning their descent. The altitude makes it difficult to stay long, and afternoon weather can change quickly in the mountains. The summit itself is surprisingly broad and flat, roughly the size of a football field. A small stone hut provides emergency shelter, though it offers little protection from lightning strikes that frequently hit the exposed peak. Michael and Alex never signed the summit register that day. Investigators would later check it thoroughly, going through every entry from September 12th. Their names weren't there. Whether they reached the summit or turned back before getting there remains unknown. What is known is that by 8 that evening, they hadn't returned to the Whitney Portal parking lot. Sarah Chen waited there with increasing worry, calling Michael's cell phone repeatedly. No answer. The GPS beacon showed no movement, its last recorded position near Trail Crest. She'd prepared a celebration dinner in the car, planning to drive to a restaurant in Lone Pine once they returned. The sandwiches sat uneaten as darkness fell across the parking lot. Sarah's first call to Michael's phone went through to voicemail at 6:30. She wasn't worried then, knowing they might be running slightly behind schedule. By 7, she'd called 5 more times, each ring adding to her anxiety. She walked to the trailhead, peering up the path as if she might see their headlamps descending through the darkness. Other hikers returned, exhausted but exhilarated, their celebrations a painful contrast to her growing fear. She asked each group if they'd seen a father and son, showing Michael and Alex's photos on her phone. Some remembered seeing them earlier, but not on the descent. At 9:30 that night, Sarah contacted the Inyo County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Mark Harrison took her report and immediately notified search and rescue. By 10:15, the first search team headed up the trail with powerful flashlights and emergency equipment. They called out for Michael and Alex as they climbed, stopping to listen for any response. Nothing came back but the wind through the rocks. The search team consisted of volunteers who knew the mountain intimately, people who'd responded to dozens of similar calls over the years. They moved efficiently despite the darkness, checking common spots where injured hikers might seek shelter. The initial search team reached trail camp at 2 in the morning. They'd covered the lower trail thoroughly, checking side paths where disoriented hikers sometimes wandered. The temperature had dropped below freezing at that elevation, adding urgency to their search. If Michael or Alex were injured and exposed to these temperatures, hypothermia would become a serious threat. The team split up, some continuing toward Trail Crest while others searched the boulder fields around trail camp, where someone might seek shelter from wind. The search intensified at first light on September 13th. 3 teams of experienced volunteers spread out across the mountain. One team followed the main trail, checking every possible spot where injured hikers might seek shelter. Another team searched the areas below Trail Crest, where hikers sometimes get disoriented and wander off route. The third team worked the summit approach, looking for any sign of the missing pair. Coordination happened through radio communications, with each team reporting their position and findings every 30 minutes. The command post, established in the Whitney Portal parking lot, mapped each area searched to ensure no section was missed. Helicopter searches began that afternoon. The California Highway Patrol flew grid patterns over the entire area, using thermal imaging cameras to detect body heat. They found nothing. The GPS beacon's last signal placed Michael and Alex somewhere between Trail Crest and the summit, but the device had stopped transmitting. Without a precise location, searchers faced the challenge of covering vast expanses of rocky terrain. The helicopter pilot, Captain Jennifer Torres, had 17 years of experience with mountain rescues. She flew low and slow, methodically scanning each section of the mountain, while her spotter used binoculars to examine shadowed areas the thermal cameras might miss. The terrain around Mount Whitney presents unique challenges for search operations. The granite landscape offers countless hiding spots where injured hikers might crawl for shelter. Deep cracks between boulders, overhanging ledges, and small caves dot the mountainside. A person lying still would be nearly invisible from more than 50 feet away, their form blending into the rock patterns. The search teams used a grid system, with volunteers spaced 20 feet apart, walking slowly across assigned sections. They marked searched areas with biodegradable orange tape, ensuring no area was covered twice while others remained unchecked. Sarah Chen and her daughter Emily arrived at the search command post on September 14th. Emily was 13, 2 years younger than Alex. She brought recent photos of her father and brother to help searchers know exactly who they were looking for. She also brought Alex's soccer jersey, hoping search dogs could use it for scent tracking. The dogs worked for hours, but the thin air and rocky ground made tracking difficult. They found no clear trail to follow. Emily stayed close to her mother, holding her hand while watching helicopters circle overhead. She'd created missing person flyers on her laptop during the drive from Sacramento, printing hundreds of copies at a local shop to post around the area. The search dogs, 2 German shepherds named Max and Luna, were specially trained for high-altitude work. Their handler, Robert Kim, had worked search and rescue for 12 years. He explained to Sarah that scent disperses differently in mountain environments, affected by thermal updrafts and crosswinds that can carry a scent trail far from a person's actual path. The dogs showed interest in several areas, but couldn't maintain a consistent trail. The rocky terrain held scent poorly compared to soil or vegetation. Robert worked the dogs in shifts, knowing that altitude affected them just as it did humans. By September 16th, over 50 volunteers had joined the search. They came from search and rescue teams across California. Experienced mountaineers rappelled down cliff faces to check ledges and crevices. Technical rescue specialists searched areas considered too dangerous for regular volunteers. They used drones to photograph sections of the mountain impossible to reach on foot. Every image was studied carefully for any sign of red or blue, the colors of Michael and Alex's jackets. The drone operators worked from a mobile command center, a converted RV equipped with multiple screens and communication equipment. They flew predetermined patterns, ensuring complete coverage of the search area while maintaining detailed logs of areas photographed. The volunteer coordination required tremendous logistics. A local church in Lone Pine opened its fellowship hall as a staging area. Volunteers signed in, received assignments, and were briefed on safety protocols. Many had taken time off work, driven hours to help search for people they'd never met. Local restaurants donated food for the searchers. Hotels offered free rooms for out-of-town volunteers. The community rallied around the Chen family, understanding that in mountain towns, everyone eventually needs help from search and rescue. The weather turned on September 17th. Clouds moved in from the west, bringing the first storm of the season. Snow began falling at elevations above 13,000 feet. Search teams had to suspend operations for safety reasons. The storm lasted 2 days, dumping 8 inches of snow on the upper mountain. When searches resumed on September 19th, any tracks or signs that might have existed were now buried under fresh snow. Sarah stood at the window of her hotel room, watching snow fall on the mountain, each flake potentially covering evidence that might lead to her husband and son. The storm that forced the suspension of search efforts was particularly frustrating because September storms often aren't severe. This one brought steady snow rather than a blizzard, but even moderate snowfall at high altitude creates dangerous conditions. Ice forms on rocks, making footing treacherous. Visibility drops to mere feet. The risk of avalanche increases. Search coordinators faced the agonizing decision to pull teams back, knowing that time was critical, but also that losing searchers to preventable accidents would only compound the tragedy. October arrived with no sign of Michael or Alex. The official search was scaled back, though volunteers continued to look whenever weather permitted. Sarah Chen stayed in Lone Pine, the town nearest to Mount Whitney, refusing to give up hope. She posted flyers in every business, offering a reward for information. She gave interviews to news stations, pleading for anyone who might have seen something to come forward. The media attention brought tips from across the country, people claiming to have seen Michael and Alex everywhere, from Mexico to Canada. Each tip was investigated. Each one led nowhere. Sarah established a routine in Lone Pine that helped her cope with the uncertainty. Every morning, she'd drive to the Whitney Portal parking lot, standing where she'd last seen Michael and Alex. She'd drink coffee from a thermos, watching the sunrise paint the mountain peaks pink and gold. Local shop owners learned her name, saved her a table at the cafe, asked gently if there was any news. She became part of the community, bound to it by tragedy but sustained by its kindness. Winter closed the mountain to regular hikers. Heavy snow made the trail impassable above 10,000 feet. Search efforts shifted to planning and analysis. Investigators mapped every area that had been searched, looking for gaps in coverage. They interviewed dozens of hikers who'd been on the mountain that day, trying to piece together a timeline. They studied weather patterns, previous missing person cases, and accident statistics for Mount Whitney. Detective Patricia Lopez led the investigation, bringing 23 years of experience to the case. She created a detailed timeline on her office wall, marking each confirmed sighting and trying to understand what happened in those crucial hours after trail crest. The investigation revealed that Mount Whitney, despite its popularity, had claimed numerous lives over the decades. Falls from the trail, altitude sickness, lightning strikes, and hypothermia were the most common causes of death. Most bodies were recovered quickly, but the mountain's vast scale meant some victims were never found. Detective Lopez studied each case, looking for patterns that might suggest where to focus renewed search efforts. She consulted with meteorologists about weather conditions that day, geologists about rockslide patterns, and wilderness medicine experts about how injured hikers behave. The following summer, 2015, searches resumed as soon as the trail became passable. Sarah Chen organized volunteer groups who systematically covered areas that hadn't been thoroughly searched the previous year. They found nothing. No gear, no clothing, no sign that Michael and Alex had ever been there. It seemed impossible that two people could simply vanish without leaving any trace. Sarah funded some searches herself, hiring professional mountain guides to explore technical terrain that regular volunteers couldn't safely access. She sold her car to pay for helicopter time, believing that aerial searches during snowmelt might reveal something previously hidden. The volunteer searches Sarah organized became remarkably sophisticated. She worked with a geographic information system specialist to create detailed maps showing exactly which areas had been searched and when. Volunteers used GPS units to track their exact paths, uploading the data each evening to build a comprehensive picture of coverage. They developed protocols for different types of terrain, understanding that a meadow requires different search techniques than a boulder field. Sarah became an expert herself, learning to read topographic maps and understanding how water, wind, and gravity might move evidence across the landscape. Years passed with the same pattern. Summer searches when the snow melted, winter analysis and planning. Sarah never stopped looking for her husband and son. She hired private investigators who specialized in missing person cases. She consulted with survival experts about where Michael might have tried to shelter if injured. She even worked with psychics, desperate for any lead, any hint about what had happened. One psychic claimed to see them near water. Another said they were under rocks. Sarah followed every lead, no matter how unlikely, driven by a mother's refusal to abandon hope. Emily grew up shaped by the search for her father and brother. She attended high school in Lone Pine, after Sarah decided to stay permanently. Unable to leave while Michael and Alex remained missing, Emily joined the school's outdoor club, learning technical climbing and wilderness first aid. She told friends she wanted to understand the mountain that had taken her family. She spent summers volunteering with search and rescue, becoming one of their youngest certified members. Her college essay wrote itself, a powerful narrative about loss, determination, and the bonds that connect strangers in times of crisis. The case went cold officially in 2019, 5 years after the disappearance. The sheriff's office kept the file open but had no new leads to pursue. Tips came in occasionally, hikers reporting found items or possible sightings, but nothing ever connected to Michael and Alex. Sarah continued her own searches, sometimes alone, sometimes with Emily, who had grown up shaped by the loss of her father and brother. They developed their own search protocols, focusing on areas that might have been overlooked. They searched during different times of day, understanding that changing light angles might reveal something previously hidden. In 2020, the pandemic closed Mount Whitney to hikers for several months. When it reopened, fewer people attempted the summit. Sarah used this quiet time to search areas that normally saw heavy traffic. She walked every foot of the main trail dozens of times, memorizing each rock and tree. She knew the mountain better than some rangers who worked there full-time. She could predict where afternoon shadows would fall, which sections of trail iced over first in autumn, where marmots built their dens. The mountain became her entire world, its geography more familiar than the suburban Sacramento neighborhood she'd left behind. David Mitchell started working as a park ranger in 2022. He'd heard about the Chen case during his training. It was one of several unsolved disappearances that rangers were briefed about. David made a point of familiarizing himself with the details. He kept a photo of Michael and Alex in his pack, just in case he ever spotted something relevant during his patrols. David had grown up in the Sierra Nevada, his father a ranger before him. He understood that mountains kept secrets, sometimes for decades, before revealing them in unexpected ways. David's approach to the Chen case differed from previous searchers. Rather than focusing on where Michael and Alex might have gone, he studied where natural forces might have moved them. He researched historical rock slides, avalanche patterns, and water flow during snowmelt. He understood that 10 years of natural processes could transport evidence far from its original location. During his patrols, he paid special attention to debris fields below cliffs, areas where sliding rocks and snow would naturally accumulate. On August 28, 2024, David was conducting a routine trail inspection near Trail Crest. Recent thunderstorms had caused several small rock slides that needed to be cleared. As he worked to move debris from the trail, he noticed something unusual about one particular slide area. The rocks looked older underneath, as if they'd been disturbed before, then covered by newer slides over the years. The pattern suggested multiple events over time, layers of geological history written in stone. His training in geology, a minor in college he'd pursued out of curiosity, suddenly proved invaluable. David began carefully moving rocks, not wanting to cause another slide. About 3 feet down, he saw the red fabric. His heart started racing. He knew immediately what he'd likely found. Using his radio, he called for backup and the search and rescue coordinator. He continued carefully excavating while waiting for help to arrive. Each rock he moved revealed more fabric, then the unmistakable outline of a backpack. He photographed everything, understanding this was now a recovery scene that needed proper documentation. The backpack was Michael's. No question. Inside, David found the wallet with Michael's driver's license, credit cards, and family photos. The GPS beacon was there too, its battery long dead, water bottles, food wrappers, a first aid kit still sealed. Everything suggested Michael had been wearing this pack when something happened. But there was more to find. David felt the weight of the moment, knowing that 10 years of questions might finally have answers. He thought of Sarah Chen, still living in Lone Pine, still searching. As the recovery team carefully removed more rocks, they discovered the truth. Michael and Alex had been caught in a rock slide, but not in the way anyone expected. The evidence showed they had tried to take shelter during what must have been a sudden weather event. David found Michael's phone, protected in a waterproof case. The battery was dead, but forensic technicians would later recover its contents. The phone also contained text messages Michael had started to compose but never sent. Messages to Sarah saying they were running late but safe. The phone contained videos Michael had recorded on September 12, 2014. The last video, time-stamped at 3:47 p.m., showed Alex sitting on rocks with dark clouds building behind him. Michael's voice on the recording sounded concerned about the weather changing. They were just below the summit, trying to decide whether to continue up or head down immediately. In the video, Alex appeared tired but determined, saying he wanted to reach the top since they'd come so far. Michael's response was cut off as the video ended, likely when he decided to put the phone away and focus on the developing situation. Weather records that investigators hadn't previously checked in detail revealed something crucial. A localized thunderstorm cell had developed rapidly that afternoon, not forecasted and not visible from the eastern approach to Whitney. These mountain storms can form in minutes, bringing lightning, hail, and dangerous winds. The storm lasted only 40 minutes, but brought intense lightning strikes to the summit area. Meteorologists reviewing the data found that this particular cell had formed from unique atmospheric conditions, a perfect storm of factors that created severe weather in a very small area. The recovery team found evidence that Michael and Alex had tried to descend quickly when the storm hit. They'd left the trail, probably trying to find shelter among the rocks. That's when lightning struck very close to them, possibly hitting them directly. The electromagnetic pulse from the strike had disabled the GPS beacon instantly, explaining why it stopped transmitting. The strike also triggered the rock slide that buried them. Burn marks on nearby rocks showed the lightning's path, multiple strikes hitting the area in rapid succession. Alex's body was found near his father's, still wearing his blue jacket. In his pocket was a note he'd been writing, probably planning to leave it at the summit register. It read, "Made it to the top with Dad. Best day ever. Can't wait to tell Mom and Emily about this." The pencil was still in his hand. The note was perfectly preserved, protected by the jacket pocket and the dry mountain air. Other items in Alex's pockets included a candy bar wrapper, a small rock he'd apparently picked up as a souvenir, and a friendship bracelet Emily had made for him. The recovery took 3 days. Every bone fragment, every piece of equipment was carefully documented and removed. The coroner confirmed that death had been instantaneous for both of them. They hadn't suffered. The lightning strike and immediate burial meant they never knew what happened. It was the only comfort in an otherwise devastating conclusion. The position of their bodies suggested Michael had tried to shield Alex, a father's instinct to protect his son even in a split second of crisis. Sarah Chen finally had answers, but they brought little peace. She'd imagined so many scenarios over the years, held on to hope that somehow they might still be alive somewhere. The reality was both better and worse than her fears. They hadn't suffered, hadn't been lost and afraid for days, but they were gone, had been gone from that very first day. Just hours after the last sighting, she received the news at the same hotel in Lone Pine where she'd stayed during the initial search, the manager holding her as she collapsed in the lobby. The memorial service was held on September 12, 2024, exactly 10 years after Michael and Alex disappeared. Hundreds of people attended, including many of the volunteers who'd searched for them. David Mitchell spoke about finding them, about how the mountain had finally given up its secret. Sarah thanked everyone who'd never given up looking, who'd supported her through a decade of not knowing. The service was held outdoors in view of Mount Whitney, the mountain that had taken Michael and Alex but also brought together a community of strangers united in compassion. Emily Chen, now 23, spoke about growing up without her father and brother. She talked about Alex's soccer dreams, how he'd wanted to play in college. She shared memories of Michael teaching her to ride a bike, helping with homework, making pancakes on Sunday mornings. She announced that she was establishing a foundation in their memory to improve lightning detection systems on popular hiking trails. The foundation would also provide support for families of missing hikers, offering resources Sarah wished had existed during her years of searching. The spot where Michael and Alex died is now marked with a small memorial plaque, placed there with permission from the Park Service. It doesn't mention the tragedy, simply reads, Michael and Alex Chen, father and son, together always. Hikers sometimes leave small stones on it, a tradition that started spontaneously and continues today. Rangers report that the memorial has become a place of reflection, where hikers pause to consider the mountain's power and their own mortality. Mount Whitney's trail has been modified slightly near where they died. Better lightning warning systems have been installed. Signs now warn hikers more explicitly about afternoon thunderstorm dangers. The trail register at the summit includes emergency weather alert information updated hourly during hiking season. These changes came directly from recommendations made by Emily Chen's foundation, practical improvements that might prevent future tragedies. David Mitchell still works as a ranger on Mount Whitney. He thinks about Michael and Alex often, especially when he passes the spot where he found them. He's become an advocate for hiker safety education, teaching classes about mountain weather patterns and emergency preparedness. He keeps their photo in his office, a reminder that nature demands respect, that mountains can change from welcoming to deadly in moments. He's written articles for hiking magazines about the Chen case, using their story to illustrate important safety lessons. Sarah Chen moved away from Sacramento in 2025. The house held too many memories. She settled in a coastal town where she can see the ocean instead of mountains. She volunteers with organizations that support families of missing persons, sharing her experience of living with uncertainty for so long. She still wears her wedding ring and keeps family photos throughout her new home. She's written a book about her experience, with proceeds going to search and rescue organizations. The book offers practical advice for families dealing with missing loved ones, mixed with her personal story of grief, hope, and eventual acceptance. The Chen case changed how search and rescue operations handle missing hiker situations on Mount Whitney. Teams now check weather data more comprehensively, including localized cell development that might not appear in general forecasts. They also expanded search areas to include zones previously thought too dangerous for hikers to access, understanding that people seeking emergency shelter might attempt to reach such places. Training protocols now include specific scenarios based on the Chen case, teaching searchers to think about how environmental factors might hide evidence over time. Other families with missing loved ones in the Sierra Nevada mountains took hope from the Chen discovery. If Michael and Alex could be found after 10 years, perhaps their own missing family members might eventually be located too. Several new searches were organized based on lessons learned from the Chen case, examining rockslide areas that might have been overlooked. 3 other missing hikers have been found using techniques developed during the analysis of the Chen search, bringing closure to families who'd waited years for answers. The story of Michael and Alex Chen serves as both a cautionary tale and a testament to persistence. It reminds us that mountains, for all their beauty, remain wild and unpredictable places. It shows that answers sometimes come when least expected, that mysteries can be solved even after hope seems lost. Most importantly, it demonstrates the power of community. How strangers will spend years searching for people they've never met, driven by compassion and the understanding that every missing person leaves behind family desperate for answers. Today, hikers climbing Mount Whitney pass the spot where Michael and Alex died, most unaware of the tragedy that occurred there. They continue toward the summit, chasing their own dreams of standing on top of the highest peak in the continental United States. If they're wise, they watch the sky carefully, ready to descend at the first sign of weather changing. They carry GPS beacons and emergency supplies. They tell someone their plans and stick to them. Many carry the emergency weather alert devices that Emily Chen's foundation helps subsidize, technology that might have saved Michael and Alex if it had existed in 2014. The mountain remains unchanged, granite peaks reaching toward sky as they have for millions of years. Storms still form without warning. Rocks still tumble from heights. Nature offers no guarantees of safety, only the promise of beauty and challenge for those willing to accept the risks. Michael and Alex Chen accepted those risks, seeking adventure and father-son bonding on a perfect September day. They found both, though not in the way they'd planned. Their last hours were spent together, pursuing a dream, sharing an adventure that would define their final moments. Their story ends not with the tragedy of their death, but with the love that drove people to search for them for a decade. It ends with a family that never gave up, volunteers who kept looking, and a ranger who noticed something unusual about a pile of rocks. It ends with answers, closure, and the bittersweet knowledge that Michael and Alex were together at the end, just as they'd planned to be for their grand adventure. The story continues through the foundation Emily created, the safety improvements made to the trail, and the lives saved by lessons learned from their tragedy. Michael and Alex Chen left a legacy written not just in stone, but in the hearts of everyone touched by their story.